Welcome. Hello, everyone.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hello. I'm Sherry May. I'm the emergency manager for the Suquamish Tribe. I wanted to come in here first to welcome you and tell you how much myself and my team appreciate you taking some of your valuable time to come in and be with us this evening to talk about tsunamis, their potential impact, as well as what we are doing to mitigate and prepare for them. But is what I'm really interested in is looking forward to hearing your questions and what you anticipate doing to prepare yourself and or your neighbors for a tsunami in our area. So with that, I'll turn this back over to Ben Jones, who is our volunteer and outreach coordinator and who will also be facilitating this meeting this evening. Again, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sherry. And for those who are just joining us, welcome. We're just getting started. This meeting is being recorded. But I'd like to introduce Alyssa Tapiro, who is the Washington State Tsunami Coordinator. And they're going to be talking with us about tsunami preparedness and what we should know. So, Alyssa, may I turn it over to you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And let's just make sure you're seeing the right one. Can you confirm if you're seeing my presenter version, or are you seeing the whole thing?
The whole thing.
Awesome, great. Well, thank you everyone for being here today. As Ben said, my name is Alyssa Tapiro, and I am a tsunami program coordinator with Washington Emergency Management Division. So I will be talking today about our tsunami hazards, both on the outer coast and then along the inner coast in the Puget Sound as well. So as you probably know, Washington is earthquake country, and unfortunately that means it's also tsunami country. We actually have the second highest earthquake risk in the United States, and we also have a very high risk of both local and distant tsunamis as well. We also have a high landslide risk, and that can cause tsunamis of their own. So here in Washington, earthquakes are inevitable, but when they'll happen, where they'll happen, and how big they'll be is uncertain. But as you can see, kind of from this graphic here, if you're not aware of some of our hazards, we have all sorts of different crustal faults and plate boundaries in Washington, especially kind of here in the Puget Sound, that make us a very seismically active region, which is the reason we have all of our beautiful mountains and valleys. Unfortunately, that's also the reason that we have a lot of earthquakes. So tsunamis are one of the most devastating side effects or secondary hazards from earthquakes, but really many things can cause tsunamis. So tsunamis are essentially caused by any large displacement of a column of water in a big body of water, so an ocean or a sea or even a lake. When that water is displaced, it causes these ripples that then turn into very large waves. And so the thing to know about a tsunami is that it is a series of long, multiple waves lasting anywhere from 12 to 24 or even more than 24 hours. So it's an event that lasts for a very long time. The first wave is often not the highest wave, nor is it the most destructive. Sometimes it's the third or even the fourth or fifth wave that causes the most destruction. Tsunamis are also very fast. So out in the deep ocean, if they're caused by an earthquake out there, when they first are created, they move as fast as a jet plane. So 500 to 600 miles per hour. As they reach the coast, they do slow down. But once they reach shore, they're still moving as much as 20 or even 25 or 30 miles per hour, which is much slower, but is still very, very fast for a human that's trying to get away on foot. They're also very powerful. So tsunamis aren't like normal waves. They have a lot of force behind them. They're actually more like a moving wall of cement than they are just waves crashing over you. And one of the reasons they are so dangerous is because they leave tons of mixed and hazardous debris behind. So everything that's in their path, they pick up. They scour all sorts of stuff away as they move out, and then they leave all that debris behind. So even once the tsunami itself is gone and our waterways have kind of returned to normal heights, normal currents, we still have an immense amount of debris then to deal with. So this is a short video kind of showing how tsunamis are created on our outer coast at the Cascadia subduction zone. So what happens is, we have one plate that's subducting under another, and when they get stuck, they build up pressure and then it snaps up. And that's what causes that displacement of as much as 2 miles of ocean water. And then you get those ripples moving outward that cause a tsunami. And those go in all directions. So what is a very soon tsunami for us that hits our outer coast very quickly will then travel across the Pacific Ocean. So you can see it pushing. Yeah.
We can't, it's still on the first slide for us of your title screen. Is it?
Oh.
Sorry to interrupt your flow, but I wanted to make sure that we were seeing the stuff that you were.
Yeah,
presenting.
no, you should be seeing different slides here. That's strange.
Just a moment.
Let's see. What are you seeing now? Still the title?
You're seeing the presenter version.
Oh, now you're seeing the presenter version. Why don't we see?
And thanks for saying something, Jackie. I thought it was because I
Yeah,
had the second
thank you.
monitor up that I was like not seeing things. So thanks for saying something.
Yeah, and unfortunately I'm working from one screen, so that may be part of it. Why don't we go ahead and do this? Are you seeing that earthquake hazards in Washington slide now?
No.
It's still just showing what looks like your presentation page.
Oh, that's weird. Okay. And see if that fixes it. Let's try this. How about that?
I see earthquake hazards in Washington.
Yay.
Oh, good. Thank you.
you.
So sorry about that. So yeah, as you can see, I'll show another slide in a few minutes that shows more of our crustal faults, but we've got that nice big Cascadia subduction zone off of our outer coast, but then we also have a lot of other active crustal faults within kind of the Puget Sound area itself. This slide just kind of showing again how those tsunamis are formed, that they are very fast and that they're not like wind waves that have a cresting wave. They really more are just like a straight surge. And then this is that clip I was showing you about. So when the plate, when that friction builds up, finally it kind of breaks, the plate kind of pops up very quickly. And then we get that displacement of the water column that causes the tsunami. And then it just moves out kind of in each direction, the way that, if you throw a rock in a pond, it's gonna move ripples out in all directions. So, why isn't it doing? There we go. So most of our tsunamis, or at least the ones that we hear about the most, are caused by earthquakes, but Washington has actually experienced quite a number of landslide triggered tsunamis, especially some that have actually caused fatalities. And then, as I mentioned before, we can actually get tsunamis within enclosed bodies of water like lakes. And essentially, when that happens, either because of a landslide that happens to move into the lake, or because of a large earthquake that has kind of moved that body of water, it's essentially like what's happening here in this pool, or if you're in a bathtub where that water starts sloshing around, and it can be incredibly dangerous. Especially if it's not something that you're expecting, if you're, out on the water or even just hanging out on the shore of that lake. It's something to keep in mind, is that even if it's not the, beach by the ocean, tsunamis can still be a hazard even at a lake. Those are called seiches. So you might sometimes hear them referred to as that. So here in Washington, we face two different tsunami hazards, local and distant. So local tsunamis essentially are tsunamis that are caused by some sort of event here in Washington, whether that's an earthquake that's within kind of our boundaries, or a landslide or something like that. If it is caused by an earthquake, that's an earthquake for which we will feel the shaking. It's close enough to us that we're going to feel that. And the shaking is going to be our primary and maybe our only warning that a tsunami is on the way. For a local tsunami, those first waves arrive in under 3 hours. Depending on where the earthquake is and where you are in relation to it, it could be that those first waves arrive within minutes, which is why it's so important to pay attention to that shaking. Because that tsunami is so close to us and it arrives so quickly, they usually cause more inundation, and we see currents that are much higher and more severe. And therefore, there's a much greater impact to the coast. Our biggest local tsunami threats are the Cascadia subduction zone and the Seattle fault. So Cascadia, which I'll show a video of in a second, is a threat to both the inner and the outer coast, because that tsunami will, once it hits the outer coast, move through the Strait of Juan de Fuca and into the Puget Sound. But actually, for those of us who live in the Puget Sound, the Seattle fault is actually, depending on where you are, a pretty big risk too. We know that it's caused tsunamis in the past, but we don't know as much about some of those historical tsunamis as we do about Cascadia. Distant tsunamis are ones that occur somewhere else in the Pacific Basin. So if they're caused by an earthquake, we don't feel it. And that's why it's so important for distant tsunamis that we receive tsunami alerts, because otherwise we may have no idea that there is this thing crossing the ocean that's going to hit us. For a distant tsunami, the waves arrive in 3 or more hours. And because of that, because they have crossed so much distance and their energy has kind of dissipated, there's usually less inundation, the currents aren't quite as dangerous, and we see less impact to the coast. Our biggest distant threat is Alaska. But thankfully, again, for those of us in the Puget Sound, even that distant tsunami threat, even though Alaska does pose a big threat to our outer coast, it doesn't pose nearly as much of a threat to the inner coast, just because kind of the angle of where those waves would be coming from, it's much harder for them to move through the Strait of Juan de Fuca. So again, kind of this is showing some of our biggest local threats, some of the faults that we know have caused tsunamis in the past, or we know have generated earthquakes big enough to potentially cause tsunamis. If you're not familiar with the Cascadia subduction zone out on our outer coast, it's 700 miles long, so it runs all along the west coast of the United States. It usually breaks or causes a large earthquake and tsunami between every 300 to 600 years. The last time was in 1700, so we are within that window. And we have about a 15 to 25% chance within the next 50 years of having a major earthquake on the subduction zone again. That would be something between an 8 to 9.0 magnitude, possibly something even larger, which means that that ground shaking would be from anywhere between 3 to 6 minutes. For those of you who have experienced earthquakes in the past, or if you were here when we had Nisqually, the Nisqually earthquake lasted for about 45 seconds, depending on where you were. And that, at least to me, when I was in it, felt like a lifetime. So when you think about 6 minutes of immense shaking, that's a very long time. We're going to see a lot of damage from that. That earthquake is also going to be followed by a massive tsunami, which hits our outer coast within 10 to 15 minutes. And depending on the location on the inner coast, hits within about 60 to 90 minutes to 2 hours. So we do see that inundation here. We do see the waves in the inner coast. That's something to be aware of, but we do have more warning. We'll also have many large aftershocks after a Cascadia subduction zone event, and thousands of smaller aftershocks for a really long time. So that's just something to keep in mind. So this is a simulation by the Department of Natural Resources of what that earthquake and tsunami could look like. So you've got the earthquake occurring, and then it's kicking off that tsunami wave. So the darker colors moving up into the red range are a wave amplitude or height of 10 feet or above. That's just what the modeling caps off at. So it could be more than 10 feet. And then as we move into those colder colors down into the dark blue, that's a wave amplitude of 10 feet or lower. So that's the trough of the wave. And this will loop, so you'll see it start again. But you'll notice that the modeling actually shows that we would see the trough of the wave first. So if the shaking, the 6 minutes of shaking was not a good enough warning, if you happen to be on the coast when this event happened, you would also see that water pulling out very, very fast, and that would be your second warning. Down in that bottom corner below the wave amplitude, you can also see time since earthquake. That's in minutes and then seconds. It's sped up. So you can see that that wave is already hitting, the Salish Sea in 45 minutes, or at least the trough is. And then you can see that dark red moving into that same area at about an hour and a half. And there it goes. It's starting to split so that it's going both north and south into the San Juan Islands and down into the Puget Sound. And the other thing to pay attention to here is that not only are we seeing multiple waves, because tsunamis are multiple waves, but we also see the waves, especially on the inner coast, bouncing off of all of our little, tight water channels and all of our, little islands and stuff. So that's also a big danger, is that when those waves are moving through small channels, that drives up the current and that causes whirlpools and things like that. So we would expect, even if we don't see as much inundation, we're going to see very dangerous currents in those areas. And this is just a truncated version of their full video, which you can find online. So if you want to watch the whole thing, it is longer than this. And this is from the same modeling, just an idea of, with that tsunami, kind of what wave arrival times we're looking at. So in sort of kind of the mid Puget Sound, you can see that it's estimated to reach Seattle about 2 hours and 20 minutes with a wave of about 3.5 feet. And then it's hitting Bremerton and the Bangor areas in around 2 hours and 10 minutes to 2 hours and 40 minutes. With anywhere of a wave between 2.5 feet to 9 feet. So that just shows that there can be a lot of variation because it depends on the bathymetry and the coastline. But what's important to take away from this is that we will see inundation. We will see pretty destructive currents. And even though those waves may not be the ones we see on the coast, 29, 40 feet, even waves of just a couple of feet are going to be really dangerous. But as I said, Cascadia is not our only danger here in the Puget Sound. So what we are looking at here are the Tacoma Fault and the Seattle Fault. So we are sandwiched right between those. And then there's some other faults above that, like the South Whidbey Island Fault that I didn't show here. But I want to highlight the Seattle Fault. Partly because this is the one that we're focusing on now. Cascadia gets a lot of attention, and we've been doing a lot of modeling and mapping for that. Now that we have a lot of that, Department of Natural Resources and our team here at Washington EMD are able to pivot a bit and focus on the inner coast and focus on the Seattle Fault, which we know has caused tsunamis in the past. So DNR is working on some modeling and some simulations for the Seattle Fault. They have not released it yet, but they will be soon. So I was able to just ask them, can you give me an idea of, through your model, how quickly those waves might arrive in the Suquamish area? And it's depending on, exactly where you are, it's about 10 to 15 minutes, which is a lot more than it, or a lot less time than it is for Cascadia. So that's why the Seattle Fault really is the one here that you want to pay attention to. And that's why it is so important, again, that if you are near the coast, on the coast, and you feel ground shaking, that you get to high ground once you can, because you don't know where that earthquake originated. You don't know if it's one that could be on the Seattle Fault that could kick off that tsunami. And with only 10 to 15 minutes till that potential wave could arrive, you don't want to waste any time trying to find that out. As I said before, Alaska is our largest distant source threat. They have large earthquakes all the time, many of which kick off tsunamis. They've had more than 80 observed tsunamis since 1788. So we are always, paying attention to them each time they have something large. But fortunately, again, not as much of a risk for the inner coast. So something you might just want to keep in mind if you're ever visiting on the outer coast or if you're out on your boat. But as I mentioned, even if something isn't as much of a threat for us, we still might see small tsunami waves. We might see that from a distant event from, Japan, or like the Tonga event that we had in January, which I'll talk about. So why do we care? Why are those smaller waves dangerous? Like I mentioned before, tsunami waves move very, very fast. And that doesn't, matter whether they're big or small, they're still moving fast. And it only takes 6 inches of moving water to knock an adult off their feet. That's not very much water at all, especially because sometimes it's very hard to tell how fast water is moving. 1 foot of swiftly moving water can pick up a car. More than that, like kind of 18 to 24 inches can lift very large vehicles, SUVs, things bigger than normal cars. And in those waves, especially if they're, if they've darkened because they're carrying, silt or mud or anything like that, there may be all kinds of debris that you can't see that could cause problems if you do get in the water, or that just could be contaminated that you don't want to get on you, motor oil or, hazardous waste or things like that. So that's why we still want folks to be aware, even if we're only saying maybe the waves will be 1 to 3 feet, those are still waves that you want to stay out of. So if you weren't aware, we actually did have a tsunami back on January 15th. It was caused by the eruption of a volcano in the Tonga region. And while Washington, thankfully, did not experience any damage, we did see waves of about 1 foot, but California actually saw waves between 3 to 4 feet. And so I'm showing some videos that we borrowed from Twitter just to give you an idea of what waves of 3 feet can look like. So the video on the left, this is just showing the waves coming in from, kind of a restaurant boardwalk area. And you can see that those waves are coming in with a lot of power. They're moving big, steel garbage cans and other debris like that. So that's certainly something that you wouldn't want to, try to contend with if you were out walking on the beach, or if you had not known that there was a tsunami advisory out and were not able to get off in time. The other video is of Crescent City's harbor and marina area. And what I like about this is that it shows the inundation they received, but that water also looks very placid. It looks like you could just go wade into it and you'd be fine. But if you pay attention in the back, especially when it zooms in a little bit, you can see that the water is actually lifting up some of those parked cars and starting to move them. So that's your clue that water that looks so placid is actually moving quite quickly. So just a reminder that we can't always tell what water is actually doing or how safe it is. So it's important for us to know both the natural tsunami warning signs for local events, or if we don't have our cell phones with us to get official alerts, and to know how to get those official alerts. So I talked about ground shaking being your best warning. It also might be your first warning and your only warning. If you feel ground shaking on the coast, drop cover and hold on where you are so that the earthquake itself doesn't cause you to injure yourself. And then when it's safe, head to high ground. But there are some other signs as well. If there is no ground shaking associated with that tsunami, or if it's coming from a distant place. For example, you could see sudden rise or fall of the ocean, the water pulling out much faster than any normal low tide would. You may hear a roaring sound coming from the ocean. It's been likened to like a freight train sound, or you might just see the water kind of behaving abnormally, bubbling or frothing or moving in a way that as folks who live near the water, we kind of start to understand how it works, and you get kind of used to seeing what the tides do during the day. If the water's doing something weird, if it's giving you that gut feeling of like, something weird is going on here, go ahead and head to high ground. Worst case scenario, there is no tsunami and you've practiced evacuating. And if there is a tsunami, you've made sure that you're safe. There are also tons of ways to get official tsunami alerts. I'm not going to go over them in too much detail, but if you go to mil.wa.gov/alerts, that is our alerting page for all of the emergency alerts you could possibly want to receive within Washington state. There's a whole section on tsunami alerts. So the ones we are most familiar with are the ones we usually get on our smartphones. So wireless emergency alerts, those are the kind that come through like Amber Alerts, where they take over your screen. They usually make a sound. You can be signed up through, your local alerts, whether that's through the tribe, your county, city, whatever, whoever is offering those. But honestly, another way, I think the best way to get tsunami alerts is actually through Twitter. I know that sounds silly, but the National Tsunami Warning Center, when they push out their alerts go to Twitter just as fast as they do to emergency management and through all of the ways that they are then pushed out to those third-party apps. So I honestly get my alerts through Twitter probably faster than I do anywhere else. If there is a big event going on, though, you may also see something on the TV or the radio. If you have a NOAA weather radio, those are a really great way to get alerts because those act like smoke detectors, meaning that you can essentially keep them silent so that you're not hearing the 24/7 weather radio talking. But if there is some sort of alert that you need to know about, and it's the middle of the night, because that's apparently the only time when we have tsunami events here in Washington, and you're dead asleep, that radio will make a nice loud sound, just like a fire alarm, to wake you up. And finally, of course, if you're on the coast and you hear one of our tsunami sirens making that unmistakable wailing sound, that is also your official warning sign that you should get to high ground. And then, of course, if you get a tsunami alert, you need to know what that alert level means and what to do. Depending on what you're signed up for, you may only actually receive notification for our highest alert levels, so a warning or an advisory. If you are signed up for others, you may receive for all 4 of these. Information statements are the most common. These mean no action needed. They usually are sent out when there's been an earthquake of note that didn't create a tsunami, but folks might want to still know that everything's okay. Tsunami watch means be prepared to take action. Something has happened which could have created a tsunami, and we're either going to upgrade that tsunami watch when we have more information, or we're going to cancel it. So stay tuned, be ready to take action, have your go bag, and pay attention to kind of local sources. Tsunami advisory is what we were under for the Tonga event. So this is primarily for kind of the maritime community and folks who are very, very near the water. It's when we're expecting strong currents and dangerous waves of between 1 to 3 feet, not as much inundation, so we don't usually evacuate folks, but we do want to get people out of the water and just away from the shore. And then a tsunami warning is the big one. That means we are expecting a major tsunami, coming in, waves above 3 feet. We're expecting a lot of flooding and inundation, powerful currents. And if you receive that and you are in a known inundation zone, or you're near the water, we want you to get to high ground immediately. And obviously, once you receive those, we want you to know what to do. So hopefully you have a go bag, so a little emergency bag with you that you can just grab and take with you. Fortunately, on the inner coast, we have a lot more high ground close by than we do on the outer coast. So it shouldn't take you too long to get out of that inundation zone or to get to somewhere safe. We would prefer that you walk your inundation or walk your evacuation route if you can. Primarily because if it's a local event, if we've had a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, our roads are going to be in no condition for folks to be driving. And if it's a distant event and our roads are perfectly passable, we still want to leave them as open as we can to emergency vehicles and to folks who are not able to walk out of that inundation zone. So if you are hardy enough that you'll be able to walk out, plan to do that. And then no matter how you get to high ground, once you get there, stay there. Tsunamis can last a long time, and it's important to wait until from local officials that it's safe to return to that inundation zone. And then I'm not going to touch too much on preparedness, but because I'm sure you've heard a lot of this, but we want you to have both supplies at home for if you need to shelter in place, if we have a winter storm or a power outage, things like that. And then we also want you to have go bags or emergency kits that you can take with you for those times when you need to quickly leave the house or when you quickly need to get out of that inundation zone. The thing to kind of keep in mind about go bags is that they only work if they're with you, which I know sounds really obvious, but that means that you have to have them everywhere where you spend a lot of time. So, one at home for everybody in your family, in the car, at work, at school. If you spend a lot of time at a house of worship, or on the weekends you go to a friend's house or anything like that, making sure that you have a bag with you no matter where you are, even if it's just the very basic supplies. That way, if disaster strikes when you're really not expecting it, you're not left high and dry, pun intended, I guess. And then the last thing I want to point out is just that preparedness is a journey. We are all on our preparedness journey, and we are all somewhere on that continuum. Nobody is so prepared that they don't have to get more prepared. And I find that comforting personally, because it means that there isn't like an end goal in sight. It's just a marathon that you kind of keep doing a little bit at a time. So if you know that you are very new on your preparedness journey and you don't have any supplies, that's totally cool. That means that there are a lot of very easy steps you can take to get more prepared. If you're the person that's got 6 months worth of food and water and supplies, that's awesome. But that still means that you need to be rotating stuff out as it expires, making sure you're restocking if you use it. There's always stuff that we can be doing, and there's always stuff that we can be doing to help each other and the folks in our communities to get more prepared as well. So preparedness is a journey. Nobody should feel, ashamed if they are not as prepared as they think they should be, because we are all somewhere on that continuum, and we can all, work together to get more prepared. And then finally, these are some of our main websites if you're looking for resources. So as I mentioned before, mil.wa.gov/alerts has all of the alerting information you could possibly want for Washington State for all of our various hazards and alerts that you could possibly need. mil.wa.gov/preparedness is the jumping off site for all of our preparedness information, whether that's personal preparedness, family preparedness, you want to get your community group or business or coworkers prepared, whatever. All of that information can be found there. And then mil.wa.gov/tsunami is all of our tsunami information. So if you're interested in more about the alert levels or our sirens, or you want to find your inundation maps or evacuation routes, anything like that, I suggest going there first and seeing if we have that information. I've got the QR codes here too. So, if you got your phone with you, you can go ahead and just pull it up. Otherwise, any of those websites is kind of a good place to start. And if I cannot answer questions after this, or if you think later on of a question that you wish you had asked, or if there's a resource that you want, in hard copy, or you want help doing something, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff and to answer questions. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I can also put you in touch with our earthquake folks, our volcano folks. If you've got other questions like that, our team is always happy to help. And with that, I will stop sharing and hand it back over.
Thank you, Alyssa. That was incredibly informative. There's been a couple of questions that have come in. This first one in the chat that I wanted to ask you is from Sarah, which is, what are some of the extra dangers since we are so close to Bangor Base?
That's a very good question. I can't necessarily speak to, what I guess the military has on base that could be disrupted by, an earthquake or a tsunami, obviously. But that is a great jumping off point. So we do work very closely with both the Navy and the Coast Guard when it comes to planning for this kind of thing. And one of the things my program has been working on, especially in the last 2 years, is working with kind of our bigger ports and marinas to craft tsunami response and mitigation strategies. So we know that, those in that infrastructure, our ports and marinas are not only especially vulnerable to tsunamis, but they have so much of our infrastructure that we need to be able to use during, a response to a big event, to a big disaster, and in kind of being resilient after it and getting back to work, to something like normal after that. And so we're working with them to figure out, mitigation strategies that they can put in place to make sure that if they are hit by a tsunami, that they experience as little impact as possible, response procedures that they can put in place so they can perhaps get some of their more delicate equipment or equipment that we know we will want to use during that response, potentially out of the inundation zone before that tsunami arrives. Again, it kind of depends on if we're talking about that Cascadia wave, which is going to arrive in 2 hours, or that Seattle fault wave that maybe arrives in 15. I actually don't necessarily know what the plans are for, say, our submarines, that have some very dangerous equipment on board, but that's definitely something that we are working with kind of those agencies and with sort of Kitsap County in general to identify and see if there are things we can do to reduce those hazards.
Thank you, Alyssa. Another question that I just got on a direct message was, what is one thing I can do when I get off this call tonight to prepare for tsunamis? So this is your one thing question.
I love that question. So if you have a smartphone, my suggestion would be to go to mil.wa.gov/alerts and find one way to sign up for tsunami alerts. There are many different ways, kind of depends on what your preference is. Again, like I said, I like following the National Tsunami Warning Center on Twitter. There's also a great app for Apple and Android called NVS Tsunami, which pushes tsunami alerts and also has all of the inundation mapping information in it. So, if you go to the coast, you can kind of see where you are and then see what your routes are in the area. If you don't have a smartphone, or if you are looking for something a little more low tech, I actually suggest putting a spare pair of shoes under your bed. And I know that is like the simplest thing you can do, which is why I really like it. Because usually our tsunamis, or at least the ones we have to worry about here in the Intercoast, are going to be preceded by an earthquake, and a pretty big earthquake. And the number one injury that folks in America receive from earthquakes is actually to the feet, because as they're trying to get out of their house, or get to another room or something, they're stepping on broken glass, broken wood, all of the debris that has fallen down during that earthquake. And if you are then trying to evacuate right after that for a tsunami, you don't want a bunch of glass in your feet. So putting a spare pair of shoes under your bed means that if you are woken up in the middle of the night because of that major earthquake, you can just slip those on. You don't even have to think about it. If you feel like being a little fancier, I just got a plastic grocery bag that's got some shoes in it. And then I think like pajama pants and a jacket in case should something happen and it's the middle of a Washington winter, I at least have like one layer of clothing that is also with me if I have to jump out my window and I can't grab my go bag. But that is the easiest, I think, best thing you can do, is just to make yourself a little more ready to evacuate your house.
Thank you, Alyssa. And yes, this is going to be recorded, not recorded, to be viewed later. You're going to be able to see it from the link tree that was just posted in the chat, that link.ee/Suquamish/OEM. If you have other, we're going to carry on with a couple of other things, but if you have other questions, just put them in the chat. But one thing I wanted to do, if you are not looking at the screen, I wanted to give you a chance to look at the screen for a second, because we're going to have a little quiz. And if people who get it right get a version of this print by the artist Mary Lovell, which is a lino cut block print with seeds and hands. So I'm going to share my screen. And if you know the answers to the questions, and you can put them in the chat, you will win this print. For those of you who are on phone, I'm going to read, or can't see the screen, I'm going to read off the questions to you. And then, so the first question is, how high must a tsunami be to make it difficult for a person to stand? A, knee high, B, ankle high, C, chest high. 5, 4, 3. Yes. Okay. Okay. Alyssa, would you like to do the honors of answering? Or am I putting you on the
All
spot?
right, yes,
Apologies.
let me unmute myself. I'm gonna say, you're making me think math now.
Uh-huh.
Are people's ankles 6 inches?
Okay, I was trying to do 6 inches from your presentation. So yes, if you answered B, ankle high, you were correct. So I'm saving your names in the chat. Okay, second question. And remember, it's if you get all 3 is the print. And I'll probably just give you one anyways if you'd like one. But okay, how fast does a tsunami travel near shore? So this isn't at the subduction zone. This is when it's near the shore. As fast as children walk, gonna say 5-ish miles an hour. As fast as a heron flies, shooting between 20 and 25 miles an hour, or as fast as a passenger, I misspelled that, train runs, which would be 100, 150 miles an hour. Okay, I'm seeing lots of C. Remember, this is when it gets close to you. This is when it's close to us. How fast will it be traveling? Oh, I see. Okay, if you put B, you're correct. Okay, and then final question. There is an earthquake and then a big tsunami. After the water recedes, what should you do? A, head home. B, check the beach conditions. Or C, remain at a high elevation place. C, yes, everyone who answered C is correct. Okay, all right, thank you everybody. I have your names in the chat and I will follow up with you to make sure you get a print. But thank you for our quiz. I'm gonna turn off the share for a second. And next I'd like to introduce Jennifer Marsland, who is also my colleague at the Suquamish Office of Emergency Management, who's gonna be talking about some of the stuff that we're doing as far as hazard mitigation, which means how are we dealing with some of the threats to our community and opportunities for us to be involved. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this webinar. And I just wanted to share with you that the tribe is currently working on updating their hazard mitigation plan. The last time it was in 2017, and so it's done on 5-year cycles. And right now we're working on engaging the community, trying to reach out. We have a survey that's going, and the link will be shared in the chat. It asks several questions. It's about 15 minutes long. Asks questions about what you think the biggest hazards are that face our community, what you think is most worth protecting in the community, and any hazards that you see, on your daily drive that, we don't see because we're not doing the same drive you are. All of that information is really, really helpful for us when we talk about policies or actions that we need to take to lower the risk for this community. Another way is we have a planning committee. It's comprised of multiple tribal government departments, stakeholders within the community, the various fire departments, law enforcement agencies, and other first responders in the area, and other emergency management jurisdictions closest to us. We need more people to get involved. We currently don't have any elders sitting on our committee. We don't currently have anybody with disabilities or any Suquamish tribal members that are just part of the general community. So we're looking for more people who are interested and want to join it in on this process, which is kind of fun and interesting. We'll talk a lot about the hazards. Please reach out to me. I would love to have you on the committee. I would love to introduce more of this information to you to just get that deeper input that we really need. Other ways are that you can engage is just email me what your thoughts are, what you see in the community. You don't have, or you can call me, which I'll put my phone number in the chat because I didn't do that. Yeah, I would love to speak to anybody who's interested in participating because we really value that information. And the survey results will be shared along with the rest of the information, the plans, policies, development, and different steps that we take along the way on our link tree as well.
Thank you, Jennifer. Anything else you want to add or? Okay.
No.
Thank you. And just a couple of other things I wanted to make sure that people on this call knew about. Our emergency management department is excited to be working with Bainbridge Prepares to be co-hosting a ham radio training series the next month that several people have already signed up for, 1 or 2 that are on this call, but that class is currently full, but we are in the process of beginning an amateur radio team for the Suquamish Tribe. So this would be once an earthquake or tsunami happens, we'd be able to have our own way of communicating both sides of the reservation, but also just with outside of the community too, if cell phones are no longer an option. So it's a cool set. We want to make sure that anyone in our community who wants this training, they can do that. And if you want to get involved with that, you can just email me. It's been in the chat, but just bjones at Suquamish. And also next month, we're going to be focusing on wildfire preparedness and smoke and air quality. And so we're going to be doing an event with North Kitsap Fire and Rescue May 7th at that firehouse theater. I can't remember the address, but it's the one that's by the Kingston Ferry dock. From 9 to 11, it's going to be like a breakfast with door prizes, and we're going to be showing a short movie, but also just another chance to be able to share more about what we can be doing to prepare for prepare your house, prepare your person, and just for smoke and wildfire hazards. And that's all of my notes. I also, if there's been one other message that's come through me for you, Alyssa. If you folks also have other additional questions for Alyssa, just put them in the chat and we'll keep asking questions here of, I don't entirely guess this, but I think, sorry if I'm not getting your question right, but this person asked how much will the water come in before a tsunami wave? Does that make sense to you, Alyssa?
My question was, how would it rise this far inland if something in the Cascade Range hit? I mean, what would we expect volume-wise for water out here?
It depends on the location, unfortunately. For a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, on the inner coast where we would see a lot less inundation. Kind of depends on the area. And I know we have maps for that. I didn't know if you were going to show them or not. But I mean, we can pull them up, or we do have mapping for all of the Puget Sound now, again, for Cascadia. And so, you can go and look at really any area within the Puget Sound to see what kind of that inundation would look like. We don't unfortunately have that yet for the Seattle fault. but that's what DNR is working on now, would be both inundation maps and then a simulation. So kind of what I showed earlier for Cascadia of what that wave propagation looks like. So I think they're planning on publishing those in the next few months. They're just kind of polishing things up. So once we have that, I think I can probably pretty confidently say that the Seattle fault scenario will probably for your area be what actually has the most inundation. Just because that wave is going to be arriving so quickly and have so much power behind it. So as soon as that comes out, I know that your emergency management folks will be in the know for that. And I'm sure we'll pass on information. But that's the scenario that I would look to as kind of that maximum inundation or maximum both depth of water on the ground, and then also how far inland it'll go. I hope that kind of answered your question.
That was helpful. And we have,
Yeah.
we're going to be, oh, go ahead, Brian, sorry.
No, it's an odd question. I know. I just wondered if there was projections yet, but yeah, it's kind of a hard one depending on what happens.
And we're going to be putting, that's one of our projects coming up, is having a map, because there are some areas, for instance, like the spit in Indianola, for example, where it's like, no matter sort of what the event is, the projection for that is pretty clear, you know? And same thing with people who live up like Totten Road, where it's sort of like, there's some events that are like, there is a range. And so I'll follow up with you about that. Thanks, Ryan. Let me see. Well, we're getting close to time. I want to thank everyone for coming. And just once again, just if you want those updates, they're on the side in the chat of the mil.wa.gov/tsunami. We're also going to be saving a recording of this webinar and going to be putting it up at the same link that you use to be able to click to log on. And from there, we'll also have a couple of other links, just as far as links to how to sign up for the Sun Alerts too, even though I think most of you probably already are signed up for the Sun Alerts, but then also a couple of other information and tips about tsunamis, as well as information, oh, I see your message, as well as information about that wildfire event on the 7th. So thank you everyone so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Jackie. Of course, Ryan. I'll follow up with you. And thank you, Tina. Thank you, Danita. And yes, Michelle, please come to that event. Yes. Thank you, Celeste. All right. Okay. Let me see. Okay, thank you, Tim. Thank you, Luis. Don't know this 360. And just a moment. I just assume that if they're still on, I'm just going to remove them. Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was great. Yeah, you had a good turnout.
Yeah, I know. There was 20 people and I only recognized like 2 of them.
Oh, yeah?
Like as like people that were like who sit next to me, you know, like I recognized some of the names. So I think that was good. Do you have experience saving recordings from webinars? Because I know that I've screwed this up by closing the window too fast.
Ooh, I don't from Zoom.
Okay.
I'll
figure this out. But if you want
I
to,
would like end recording and then let it do its wizardry.
Okay, I'm gonna edit this part out, by the way, of the amateur hour.
I assumed.
Yeah. But if you want to email us your address, we'd love to send you a print as well as a shirt and a couple of other thank
Oh,
yous.
thank
for
you.
dropping
Yeah,
by
I
with
will.
us.
I will do
Mhm.
that.
Mm.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I mean, we'll talk soon about other evacuation stuff. But if there's anything else, just let me know. We're always happy to provide materials and fun stuff.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Have a good night.
Hey, Mary. Hey, Mary. Do you know how to save webinar recordings?
Did you record it?
Yeah.
Is it on? Usually when you end the meeting, it goes save to cloud or save to, so pause or stop it.